Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. My name is Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com. And we have our first return guest, Brian Howell, coming to us from Boulder as we get ready for to preview the Colorado spring game that's coming up this weekend. We want to thank everybody for subscribing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and of course our YouTube channel, CFB Nation. We continue to grow the podcast during the off season, which is great. We can't wait. We are only 18 weeks from week 0. Brian, I count it down every week. We are at 18 weeks from week 0, and of course, just a few days from the Colorado spring game. But before we get into that, I want to talk to Bill Bender just for a second. And Bill, just catch the listeners up. You earned a new nickname in the office this week, Bill Fender Bender. Had an issue with his garage, apparently.
Yeah, so. Like hopefully Brian can back his car out. I backed my car out of the driveway, and the door, I opened the door. I was in park, or not in park, I don't think. The car was off. But I left the car in reverse, and it rolled down the hill, struck the basketball hoop, and the door is going to need repaired. So I'm in the doghouse in my house. But, this is like, I'm a pretty good driver, guys, but my driveway is a problem. The freeways, the streets, the traffic, not a problem. Apparently my backing out of my driveway is a problem.
That is a problem.
I
have not had that one happen, so that's good.
That was
Brian, you and I crossed paths at the Celebration Bowl here in Atlanta. You spent a lot of time with Deion that week when he was coaching his final game at Jackson State, and you caught us up on what that week was all about. So we really appreciate you making some time this week.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate having me.
So when we were in Atlanta, like you told me, we just talked about it a little bit before the show. You've covered more in-season coaching changes than bowl games in your time at Colorado. So it's been a while, and it's sort of a lame question, a cliche question to start us off here. But have you ever seen anything? You've been on the beat 14, 15 years. Have you ever seen anything like what Deion has brought to the table out in Colorado these first 4 months?
No, I mean it's pretty insane. It's so different covering him than any other coach, and especially to go. It's such a 180 is not even do it justice to say from Carl Durrell to Deion Sanders, because I liked Carl, but just a very quiet personality, a guy that even as head coach just shied away from the spotlight. He was not a guy that was going to be out there, pumping up the program. You didn't see him out at other team sporting events very often. The cameras, he didn't really care for those. I mean, when it was not during the season, you just didn't hear from him. I mean, he would go hole up in his office and do work. And so, the complete 180 to Deion, to where cameras are everywhere and it's almost information overload, with him. And, he loves the cameras, and, he's out there. He's wearing the CU cross country shirt at practice. He's going to basketball games. He's going to lacrosse games. He's out there. He wants everybody to know about Colorado's program, and so it's such a 180. And it's insane. I mean, it's a celebrity that's your head coach here. So it's definitely different than we've ever seen.
Well, and a lot was made. Every coach in the country weighed in on his speech about bringing the Louis and the transfer portal, and something up until last week, most of the guys had stayed, but there's been a run of guys that are going into the transfer portal, Brian. And are any of those guys impact players that caught your eye? And two, is this just a result of, spring football attrition these days?
Well, I think it's, number one, it's a result of just the way college football is in general. But, with him, they have to weed out some players. Before last week, they had 95 projected scholarship players for next year, and the limit's 85. So you had to have at least 10 leave, but they want to add even more. So there's going to be 20 or 25 guys that leave. They're going to sign another 10 or 15 guys from the transfer portal, which is insane because they're already about 25 or 30. So the ones that left this last week, yes, there's some impactful players. The biggest one was Nico Reed, the starting cornerback from last year. Really good player, just a true sophomore last year. Kind of burst onto the scene 2 years ago in the finale, had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown against Utah. Last year started all 12 games at corner. He's a pretty solid corner, but frankly, he saw the writing on the wall. I mean, Travis Hunter, Cormani McClain, that's your starting corners right there. And then Deion also brought in Tavion Beasley from Jackson State and Kindrich Breedlove from Ole Miss, I believe. All the transfers run together. So I mean, he's brought in all these corners that Nico Reed, he could have stayed and fought for a backup spot, but he's too talented. I mean, he's gonna go play somewhere else. And then they had a couple other rotational players on defense, but I think it's clear at this point that this staff wants to get better. And you're looking at a bunch of guys from a 1-11 football team that just want to go play somewhere else and get more playing time.
Yeah. So, is there any sort of skepticism creeping in at all? Or does it seem like the majority of folks are totally on board out there with Deion? He's not afraid to overpromise. But, I guess with the record still 0-0, it's all still fun and games right now.
My sense is that most of the skepticism is outside of Buff Nation. The fan base is very on board and excited about all this, and they should be. I mean, their football team was 1-11 last year, and as we started off, they've seen more coach firings than bowl games in recent years. So they're 100% on board and excited about this, and that shows by the fact that this week's spring game is sold out for the first time ever. And but I think there is skepticism on the outside. I've seen them projected to win 3-4 games, and they're about a 3-touchdown underdog for the TCU game to start things off. It's a little early for that, but there's still, that's the perception of this team, is there's still a long way to go.
Well, and speaking of the fan base, so a lot of chatter about Colorado, Big 12, Pac-12, those kind of things. You've covered Colorado long enough. When you talk to fans, and I deal with this with Nebraska a little bit, some of them still would prefer to be in the Big 12. Is the Colorado fan base right now thinking, okay, we want to stay in the Pac-12, or do you kind of hear all this realignment talk, and do they, the fans, not the administrators, do they have their eyes on that Big 12?
Well, I think the fans just want to go wherever is going to be best for Colorado. And if that's the Big 12, great. If it's staying in the Pac-12, great. And there are those fans that are sentimental towards the Big 12, and they miss the Nebraska rivalry, which wouldn't come back if they go to the Big 12, but they miss the K-State rivalry. They miss, Kansas and some of those teams. So I think there are fans that would like to go back there, but frankly, I think that the biggest thing is just, where are we going to get the best deal? What's going to not have Colorado fall behind from where they are right now? And so I think they're okay going wherever, as long as there's the best money.
Has Deion commented on it at all?
He hasn't. He's pretty much said, hey, I'm coaching the Pac-12 this year. We're looking forward to this year. So he's pretty much stayed out of it.
So what, I don't know if you've talked to Rick George much at all about, kind of the changes internally inside the building that they have to make regarding managing, like you labeled him, a celebrity coach in his own PR team, and how the sports information department merges with the PR team, and what happens when there is the first conflict. Like I said, it's probably all still, roses and rainbows right now, but at some point Deion's going to want something, Rick George is going to say no, and what happens then?
Yeah, and so far he's wanted a lot of things and he's gotten them. So I don't know if Rick George has said no at this point. There's maybe a few things, but yeah, I mean, the changes are pretty dramatic. I mean, even just with the structure, I mean, his office was totally remade, and it goes from a big office-looking office to, I mean, he changed the carpet, he painted the walls, he's got his sayings on the walls. There was just off of his office, there was a little room that was kind of a conference room that he totally, gutted all of that, and it's now his own little personal lounge and dressing room where, it's got a couch, a TV, a little locker in there. That's where he changes clothes, and
he's got to host Lil Wayne somewhere, right?
That's right. So the recruiting lounge, went from just this nice little space to, he wanted to make it more club-like and put in new lights and paint and all that stuff. And so there's a lot of things. The dining hall, he wanted more meals served every day. So they had to actually increase the staff in the dining hall, things like that. And, so from what I was told from people in the building, the first few months were, a big adjustment and kind of rough as everybody got used to each other, and, a whole slew of new people coming in there, people that have been there not knowing what their roles are going to be. The first little bit was pretty rough, but they're settling in at this point and kind of adjusting to the new life of having Deion around.
Well, and he brought a pretty good quarterback with him, and I'm doing NFL draft content for Sporting News as well, and I started doing the list of quarterbacks for the 2024 draft, and Deion Sanders is a name that's popping up. I mean, maybe not with Drake May and Caleb Williams, but so what have you seen out of him? Obviously the stats were prolific at Jackson State, but how has he looked in spring practice? Is there anything you can tell us about his game that maybe casual fan doesn't know about yet?
Yeah, we've only been able to watch a couple of practices, which is more than, I guess, previous years at times. But he's going to be the best quarterback they've had, at least since Steven Montez, who was there in 2019, and possibly going back even further, back into the early 2000s and late 90s. So he's got that potential to be, maybe the best they've had since Coy Detmer and Cordell Stewart, back in the mid to late 90s. So he's really good. And he's a very attention to detail guy. He's a leader out there. He's one that he talks about, guys mess up on a rep, a receiver breaks a route. He goes, I kick him out of my group, and he's done in my group for that day, And so, he's that type of, he's high demand. Let's get this done. He's a quarterback that once you get on the field, let's work. And, for him, it's interesting because this will be his 30 years as a starter, third offensive coordinator, third offense, third QB coach. So he's had a lot of change in his life, but he's adjusted to it. And he's just such a high football IQ guy that he just takes it in and soaks it in. And he talks as though, hey, whatever, no big deal. Let's just learn a new offense and go.
I was looking at Deion's staff, and I was looking, because when you think about it, Deion has virtually no Power 5 experience as a head coach or even as an assistant. And he played at Florida State a long time ago. So he came in, he got Sean Lewis at offensive coordinator, who was the head coach in the MAC. But there are some guys on his staff that do have kind of long resumes as Power 5 assistants. Charles Kelly, his defensive coordinator, 15 years as an assistant, 4 years DC at Florida State. And he was also at Georgia Tech, Alabama, and Tennessee. Tim Brewster was a head coach at Minnesota for a little bit and has been a Power 5 assistant for a long time. Sal Sunseri, another guy with a long Power 5 resume. Do you feel like he was smart in how he put his staff together to kind of, get some guys who have been around programs like this? Yeah,
I think it'll be interesting to see how it comes together. But I like the makeup of the staff in that it does have that experience that you talked about. 4 of the 5 assistants on offense have been head coaches, and not necessarily at Power 5, but you also have Gary Harrell, the running backs coach, who he was the head coach at Howard at one point, and the only one that hasn't been a head coach is Brett Bartoloni, who's a receivers coach, very young guy, but he was the OC quarterback coach at Jackson State last year, worked closely with Shedeur. He played under Mike Leach, and Leach was a big mentor to him over the years. And then you have a couple other young guys that not a ton of experience, but they've been with Deion. And so half the staff's been with him, half of them maybe have not, but they got that experience, and they've known each other through different channels. And even Sean Lewis, he comes from the MAC, but he was a coordinator at some previous stops with Dino Babers and played at Wisconsin not too long ago. Still looks like he could play. He's still kind of a younger guy. And so I do think it's a good staff, and they seem to have meshed well together, and they have fun together. That's for sure.
Well, I was going to ask about the corners. You mentioned them earlier, McLean and Hunter. From at least a recruiting / ranking standpoint, there's potential to be their best cornerback tandem in years, obviously. I'm trying to think of a Colorado corner that went in the first round. I mean, this has got to be the best tandem they've had, perhaps maybe in the country in a few years.
Yeah, in 2016 when they won the South, they had a really good tandem. Chidobe Awuzie, Akello Witherspoon, who are both still in the NFL. Both were 3rd and 4th round picks, but these guys could be better. That tandem in 2016 was pretty fantastic, but these guys, Travis and Cormani could be. I mean, they were both number 1 corner in the country in their class, right? And so you would think that they're going to be better than those two guys even. But the interesting thing is they don't have either one right now at corner. I mean, Cormani is in high school right now and gets here in the summer, and Travis is playing the entire spring at receiver. So he's taken 1 rep at corner. And last week there was a practice. Everything's on video. And so in one of the videos, Deion was not happy with what the corners were doing. And he yells over to Travis, says, "Get in there and play corner." So he gets in there and he goes against Montana Lamonius Craig, who was CU's top returning receiver, and one play and breaks up the pass. And Deion immediately says, "That's what we want." And he jumped in there with no previous practice at corner, does exactly what Deion wants. And he said, "You're done. I don't need to see anymore." That's been his one play at corner the entire spring. So these are your top 2 corners. They're not even playing it right now.
So wait, what do you think Travis Hunter's snap count will look like? I mean, is he going to play a starting corner and 20 snaps at receiver? Or, I mean, is this one of those two-way guys we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a unique player this year in that nobody's said it yet, but I believe he's too good at corner. Like, I believe he's going to be the starting corner and kind of like you said, 20 snaps a game at receiver, something like that. But honestly, receiver-wise, CU had a guy several years ago, Paul Richardson, who went in the 2nd round and played a number of years in the NFL. He's probably the best receiver I've seen. Laviska Shenault was here, but he was more of an athlete. Travis might be the best receiver I've seen at Colorado since Paul Richardson. So he's pretty phenomenal athlete. I mean, he had over 3,000 yards somehow in something like that in high school as a receiver. So he might be their best receiver, but he's also their best corner.
I mean, he had a great catch in the Celebration Bowl that you and I saw down the end there, the touchdown, late touchdown in the 4th quarter.
And that was his 2nd touchdown of the game, I believe.
So, yeah, well, that's going to be exciting for him. What do you expect Saturday? What should we expect Saturday? It's a 3:00 kickoff on ESPN. Chris Fowler, proud CU alum, is doing the game. I read a story, I think it was in your paper actually, about some of the plans that they might mic up Deion and have sort of a unique broadcast. It's going to be a full house, which is going to be a really weird vibe for a spring game. So what are you thinking? What are you expecting?
I don't really know what to expect because we've never seen anything like it. Last year they estimated 1,950 people were there, and you know how those estimates go. It's the SID looking around and said, probably 1,950, whereas probably more like 1,100, something like that. So nobody ever comes to this thing. And it's 45,000 general admission tickets. Nobody has assigned seats. So I think it's going to be a little bit chaotic in that regard. But I think it's going to be more of a party atmosphere. Deion did tell us yesterday he'll be mic'd up the whole time. I don't know how much of a game it's going to be. I imagine it'll be ones versus ones, things like that. But with the transfer portal opening last Saturday, they've had 9 guys enter the portal since then. So all of a sudden depth is not quite what it was a week ago today. So there could be some situations where you can't play so deep at certain positions, but I think that they want to do more game-like and it'll be somewhat of a party atmosphere. We've heard some rumors and hints of some celebrities that'll be there, but Deion, when he was asked about that yesterday, said, I don't know about that. I don't get into that. So, of course, he does. So,
sure, he doesn't. Right.
So we'll see. I imagine there's going to be some celebrity presence there as well, and I think it's going to be somewhat chaotic, somewhat party-like, and hopefully some good football.
I mean, there's a little pressure to have, more than just a bland, boring scrimmage, right? I mean, you got to spice it up. That's what his whole shtick is.
Yeah, and the whole fan base, out of all the players out there, they're going to want to see Shedeur. They're going to want to see Travis Hunter. And interestingly about Travis, Deion said yesterday, even though he hasn't played it all spring, he said he's probably going to play some corner on Saturday. So, they're just going to throw him wherever he wants to be. But I think those are the two guys fans want to see. Dylan Edwards is another one, the true freshman running back that was a Notre Dame commit that flipped to CU. He's incredibly fast, and every clip they show, every single day, he's making a long run. So there's players like that fans want to see, but it's going to be an interesting atmosphere. I don't even know what to expect. It's not even supposed to be warm. It's been 80. It was 80 last week, and then it snowed, and then it's been warmer, and the temperature, the high I've seen is about 45. So it's not going to be a super warm game.
Well, I got news for you, Brian. That it works that way in Ohio too. We went from 70 to 30 in 2 days last week. So
wow, I thought we were the only ones like that.
Ohio, we always like to joke you can get all 4 seasons in one day.
Yeah, that's kind of what they say. I hear a lot of times, and so yeah, it was crazy last week. But Deion wants that 70 degrees, but I don't think he's going to get it.
Well, thank you very much for taking time with us, Brian. Again, people can read you at buffzone.com. Terrific Colorado beat reporter. You got a big day in front of you on Saturday. We'll be reading on Sunday morning to see what you've got, takeaways and what have you. But we really appreciate you joining us.
You bet. Anytime, guys.
All right. We'll take it easy, and good luck to you on Saturday.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. That was good to hear. We got a little breakdown, a little scoop there that Travis Hunter is going to be a two-way guy.
Yeah, and those guys attract attention too. Obviously the standard is still Charles Woodson, but we've seen Chris Gamble do that. We've seen some other players. Chris Gamble, by the way, Ohio State, one of the most underrated two-way players of all time. So yeah, that was what struck me when he said, I was thinking corner, but then he can play receiver. A lot of exciting players. I'll tell you this, Bill. We're going to talk about some of the spring games I watched last weekend. I am excited to turn Colorado on Saturday. I am. I was most excited to watch Texas last weekend, and we'll talk about that here in a second, like I said, but I'm legit excited to see what this Colorado experiment looks like.
Yeah, no doubt. So we've got, that's 3:00 Eastern. Like I said, on ESPN. It's the only spring game ESPN has decided to put on, and the Deion Sanders effect it's been even larger than I thought it was going to be. I had my doubts, had my skepticism. How much can one guy do? Well, one guy has done a lot in 3 or 4 months. It's been pretty amazing to watch for sure. So let's get into some other spring games. But before we do, we'll have a little Trocchi trivia, Colorado themed. Get your Buffalo helmet on.
No.
Ready to go?
Sure.
Colorado has won 1 bowl game this century. That's it. 1 bowl game. Okay. I'll tell you what it was. 2004 Houston Bowl. They beat UTEP. They came from behind in the 4th quarter.
Okay.
Beat UTEP in the Houston Bowl. Who was Colorado's QB? Who was Colorado's coach back then? That is today's trivia. We will get to the answer at the end of the show. So, you mentioned the spring games from this weekend. We had some big ones: Texas, Ohio State, Georgia. They were all out there. You wrote a story about Texas for sportingnews.com yesterday. Let's start with Texas, and we can touch on the other two.
Yeah, Texas, obviously went into the spring game, and we talked about it last week, wanting to watch Arch Manning, left the spring game thinking Quinn Ewers looked pretty darn good. And it started early. The thing with Quinn Ewers, this is a very loose comparison, but since I've started watching him, I thought, and this, nothing with attitude, just skill set. I was like, that's Jeff George, because he can throw the ball a mile, and I don't know how accurate he is. Well, on Saturday, he was throwing the ball a mile, accurate, hit Xavier Worthy early. They have A.D. Mitchell, the Georgia transfer, had a great game. They've got a decent running game. He's going to have guys to throw to. And he looked, as Sark said, sometimes you take a coach for his word. Sark said he looked comfortable. So Arch, not as much, looked like a freshman. And I think this is best case for Texas because you can develop you can have yours play. Hopefully, balls out. Malik Murphy looked good too, Bill. So they alternated Murphy and Manning. They can develop those two behind. I don't think anybody has plans to go in the transfer portal.
I bet Murphy goes in the transfer portal.
He might, but
I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Their offense could be elite. I'll say it. I'm not going to say the 3-word phrase about Texas that everybody likes to joke, but their offense could be elite this year with all of those guys to throw to in the Big 12. And if Ewers plays like that, they're going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you said, especially with Oklahoma down a little bit, or some questions around that program. Obviously, they had such a poor season last year. Texas could win the Big 12 on the way out. You pegged them as a possible favorite.
I think they will be among the favorites in the Big 12 because, and some of it's the brand, and I am legit excited to see what they do when they go to Tuscaloosa because Alabama has their spring game this weekend, and there's questions about their quarterback. Paul Feinbaum made some news yesterday by saying, Paul. I always say when Paul goes on a radio show and says something, when he said, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Saban's doing some transfer portal shopping at quarterback. Paul's not just pulling that out of thin air. I'll put it that way. He's pretty on par when he has takes on Alabama in particular.
And they were rumored to, be pursuing Drake May way back when. So I think they had some questions about their quarterback. Georgia, Carson Beck looked very good. Put up some big numbers. I thought the most interesting thing with the Georgia spring game, or not necessarily the spring game, is that Bear Alexander decided to go into the transfer portal. 5-star defensive lineman. He was a guy Mike Griffith talked to us about that could be the next great nose guard, nose tackle disruptor in that Georgia, machine as they continue to produce amazing NFL defensive linemen. That one sort of came out of nowhere because I think people were expecting a big year out of him.
Yep, and that was a big transfer for Georgia with Alexander leaving. But my takeaway from watching their spring game was they had, I said this on Sports Grid yesterday, had 25 guys catch a pass. They had 8 different guys catch a pass of 20 yards or more. Every time I looked up, there was a dude, not Brock Bowers, catching a pass down the field. So that was like watching an NFL game. They're stacked. That was the fastest spring game I watched in terms of guys playing fast. And Carson Beck looked good. So Carson Beck looks good. There's rumors that Vandegrift may hit the portal. That is the consequence of these games, right? So You mentioned Murphy, Vandegrift. I have a feeling Sporting News in the next week or so may have a story about second wave transfer quarterbacks. So it's coming.
It is coming, especially at these elite programs when they recruit 3 good quarterbacks. There's no reason to stay. I mean, you looked at the next year's NFL draft class. You looked at, top 10 quarterbacks, and you told me 8 had transferred. I mean,
right.
There's no reason to sit. You got to get on the field. If you're a really good QB, you got to get on the field.
Right now, this is a little tease for our listeners. So we every year we do the top 10 NFL quarterbacks for next year's draft. And the only 2 on our list for next year's draft that didn't transfer is Drake May, who, as you just mentioned, was sought after. And if you talk to the right people, he was definitely sought after for some absurd money. And J.J. McCarthy, who was part of a quarterback competition with Cade McNamara last year, where that was a real question whether he might transfer. So
he caused Cade to transfer.
Right. He caused a quarterback to transfer. And there's no guarantee that J.J., maybe he stays for his senior year. We don't know. So that's the name of the game at that position. So, and then, Ohio State was the other one that I watched. McCord looked okay. That's one that always causes a lot of overreaction here in Columbus. My takeaways from that was McCord looked a little rough, but so did C.J. Stroud in his first spring game. And so did, as the starter, so did Justin Fields when he was transitioning to play at Ohio State. Those guys were fine. And they got this guy that they were working in the slot named Marvin Harrison that if you throw the ball to him, you'll be fine. So I think Ohio State, my bigger concern for them is losing Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones, the two offensive tackles that'll go to the NFL. They've got to be able to protect that. So I think their offensive line's got some work to do.
Let's touch on two games that are coming up this weekend, Notre Dame and Alabama. Alabama, in addition to Colorado, of course, and we'll keep an eye on Colorado. But the other two of note, Alabama, I believe it's going to be on SEC Network. Notre Dame will be on Peacock, both on Saturday afternoon. Alabama's trying to figure out their quarterback situation, which is something kind of new for Nick Saban.
Right. And this is what I'm writing about that for this week. Jalen Milroe, guy that we saw play. Ty Simpson, 5-star quarterback. I almost called him Ty Webb. I watched Caddyshack the other night. That's why I made that face. I don't want to do the
nice choice right there. Nice choice.
So I did not call him Ty. He's not Ty Webb. So back to the point. Interesting competition because it sounds like nobody's really separating themselves. You would think Milroe has the advantage. Eli Holstein's a freshman that they have too. That, when I was talking to some people at the championship game, one of them, joking, he was like, Eli Holstein's going to start anyway. But I'm like, what? So curious to see what that looks like because the standard there, much like Ohio State, your last three quarterbacks have been first-round picks between Tua and Bryce and Mac Jones. And that's not even counting Jalen Hurts, who just got paid more money than I will ever see in my lifetime. So, I'm very intrigued because Saban is running on, Billy's running on, if they don't win it next year, that's a 3-year drought. And man, I don't know how people in Alabama would handle a 3-year drought.
And then the Notre Dame quarterback situation, which when Sam Hartman announced his transfer from Wake Forest after setting all those records, ACC records, school records, 5th-year guy, I just thought it was a slam dunk that Hartman would be the guy. But, you read the reports coming out of South Bend and the bits and pieces that they allow the media to see, and it seems like Tyler Buchner is really giving him a run for his money. With the last time we saw Buchner, he was healthy in the bowl game against South Carolina. He played great. He had a lot of hype coming out of high school, didn't necessarily deliver in a reserve role. And then, like I said, he was hurt last year. Like he backed up Ian Book, and then he was hurt a little bit when he had his opportunity. Didn't look great before he got hurt, but it was still very early in the season. And then, but he's not giving it to Hartman. It looks like it may go into the fall.
And you're the Notre Dame guy here. Like, is there ever a year where they don't have a quarterback controversy? Like, they don't have two guys? I mean, it's every year. That
was the thing. It looked like this was the year they had one guy that was going to be the guy, and now Buchner is saying, "Don't forget about me."
And I like the competition, and it will probably spill into the fall, and that'll be the focal point of that one as well. Because Drew Pine obviously hit it. I know Brian Driscoll had. I saw a tweet by our good friend the other night that sounds like Drew Pine was doing well, and Brian was very happy for him. And that's good, So Drew Pine will be a guy that helps Arizona State break in a new coach. And with Dillingham there, he'll probably have a good season. So, but back to Notre Dame, it's curious that Hartman, with all those numbers in the ACC and all those records you and I have talked about, is going to get a little push. And to me, it just comes down to this. I mean, I saw Tyler Buchner play against Ohio State last year. It didn't really – I know it was early in the season, but the offense never really threatened a suspect Ohio State defense. When they play, their schedule set up that they should be undefeated when they play Ohio State in South Bend on September 24th. And they need to have the right guy under center because that is a statement game for that program because it's going to be a while before they see Ohio State again. It means everything for recruiting, for the playoff chase, for perception, and just living in this part of the country. I know come August, that'll be the chatter, Notre Dame and Ohio State again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So before we get out of here, Trocchi trivia answer from Mr. Bill Bender. The question is, in 2004, Colorado won its only bowl game this century. They beat UTEP in the Houston Bowl 33-28. Who was Colorado's QB and coach for that memorable bowl victory.
I know the coach is Gary Barnett.
Yes.
And is the quarterback, did he play in the NFL? Or do we not even know?
I'm not sure.
Right.
But
So
I'll give you a big hint.
Sure.
He's a large college football personality nowadays.
Okay. Oh, it's Joel Klatt.
Joel Klatt was the quarterback.
So I was going to guess. I knew it was. So Brian mentioned Coy Detmer. I knew Coy Detmer was way early. And yeah, Joel Klatt won the Houston Bowl.
Joel Klatt is the owner of the last Colorado Bowl victory.
Okay. So, and I know he was the quarterback when they played. I should have guessed that right away because they played that really loaded Texas team the following year, I believe, in the Big 12 championship game. And they lost 70 to that one. That's the 70-3 game.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why I asked the Big 12 question, because I'm curious to see how much light there really is on Deion this year. And does that mean that they consider going for more light in the Big 12? It's a really good big picture question for that program.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, all right. Well, that's all we've got. We will be back next week, of course. We'll look at the happenings of the Alabama game and the Notre Dame game and everything like that in Colorado and see how that pans out. We once again thank Brian Howell for joining us from buffzone.com, giving us some insight out there in Boulder. So thanks, everyone, for listening to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week.